Welcome, dear friends, to another story from the blessed Christian storyteller. Today, I invite you to journey with me to the rugged heart of Montana Territory in 1887, where the wind sweeps across endless plains, and where one woman's desperation will lead her to a deception that changes everything. This is a story about Lady Catherine Ashford, a British noblewoman who loses everything and must become someone she's not to survive. It's about Jackson Stone McCord, a ranch foreman whose hardened heart has forgotten how to trust. And it's about how God works in the most unexpected ways, using our brokenness to reveal his perfect plan. So settle in, and let me tell you a tale of the American frontier, where masks fall away, hearts are transformed, and love blooms in the wilderness under the watchful eye of our Creator. But before we begin, if you're new to this channel, please take a moment to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this tale touches your heart, leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear about God's redemptive love today. Now let's begin. The morning fog clung to London's cobblestone streets like a burial shroud as Lady Catherine Ashford stood before her father's coffin. At 24, she had thought herself prepared for this moment. Her father had been ill for months, but nothing could have prepared her for what came after. "I'm afraid the situation is quite dire, Lady Catherine," Mr. Pemberton, her father's solicitor, had said just hours after the funeral. "Your father's debts are substantial. The estate is mortgaged beyond redemption. Everything must be sold." Catherine had sat in stunned silence. "But Mr. Whitmore, the American industrialist, father said the marriage contract would solve everything." Pemberton's uncomfortable cough told her everything before he spoke. "Mr. Whitmore has withdrawn his offer. He was, shall we say, interested in the title and the estate, not personal attachments. With both now worthless, the words hung in the air like a death sentence. Catherine was alone, penniless, and, worse yet, stranded in America. Her father had insisted they travel to New York to finalize the marriage arrangement, spending their last resources on passage and accommodations. That night, in the shabby boarding house that was all she could afford, Catherine remembered her father's cousin, Bernard Ashford, who had emigrated to Montana Territory decades ago. She had never met him, but she knew he ran a cattle ranch. With trembling hands, she composed a telegram. "Dear Cousin Bernard, father passed. Alone in America. May I join you? Your cousin, C. Ashford." The response came 3 days later. "Charlie, good to hear from you, nephew. Come on out. Ranch needs young men with English backbone. Sent train fare. Wire arrival. Uncle Bernard." Catherine stared at the telegram in horror and wonder. Charlie, nephew, her short, androgynous name. Catherine could be shortened to Cat, Kate, or Charlie. Bernard had assumed she was a young man. For 3 sleepless nights, she wrestled with her conscience. She was a lady, raised in propriety, taught that deception was sin. She opened her Bible to the story of Jacob deceiving his father Isaac to receive the blessing meant for Esau. "Lord," she prayed, "Jacob's deception brought years of trouble. Is this wrong? Or is this you opening a door?" But what choice did she have? No money, no prospects, no family in England. If she revealed her true sex, Bernard would surely rescind his invitation. No respectable rancher would take in an unmarried woman. And so, with a prayer for forgiveness and guidance, Catherine cut her long auburn hair. She purchased men's clothing from a second-hand shop. She practiced lowering her voice, walking with longer strides, sitting with sprawled confidence instead of proper posture. The journey west took 2 weeks. As the train rattled across the vast American frontier, Catherine watched the landscape transform, from cities to farmland to endless prairie. With each mile, she felt herself shedding her former life like a snake's skin. Lady Catherine Ashford was dying. Charlie Ashford was being born. When the train finally pulled into Silver Creek Station, Montana, Catherine, no, Charlie, stepped onto the platform with her heart hammering. A weathered sign read, "Silver Creek. Population 247. God bless." A young ranch hand approached. "You Charlie Ashford?" "Yes," she said, deepening her voice. "Name's Pete. Mr. Ashford's up at the high pasture. Won't be back for a week. Foreman Stone said to fetch you to Thunder Ridge Ranch." Thunder Ridge. Even the name sounded formidable. As they rode out in the wagon, Pete chattered about the ranch, but Catherine barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on the rolling hills, The towering mountains in the distance, the endless sky. England had been green and tame and civilized. This was raw, wild, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. "That's Stone," Pete said, pointing to a figure on horseback in the distance. Even from afar, Catherine could see why they called him that. Jackson Stone McCord sat in the saddle like he'd been carved from granite, broad-shouldered, still as the mountains themselves, radiating an authority that needed no words. As they approached, she saw more. A face weathered by sun and wind, eyes the color of a winter storm, a jaw set in permanent determination. A man in his early 30s who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. Those winter gray eyes swept over her, and Catherine felt her disguise dissolving under that penetrating gaze. She forced herself to stand tall, to meet his look without flinching. "So you're Bernard's nephew?" His voice was like gravel. "Charlie Ashford." "Yes, sir." Stone's eyes narrowed. "You can drop this, sir. Out here, you earn respect. You don't get it handed to you with a fancy accent." He looked her up and down with clear disdain. "English dandy. Probably never done a day's work in your life." Catherine felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd managed a household, organized charity events, supervised servants, but that would only prove his point. Here, those skills meant nothing. "Pete, get him settled in the bunkhouse," Stone said. "Tomorrow morning, 4 a.m., I want him in the stables. If Bernard wants to make a ranch hand out of this." He paused, his lip curling slightly. "Pretty boy, then I'll do my best. But I don't coddle." With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode off, leaving Catherine standing in the dust of his departure. "Don't mind him," Pete said sympathetically. "Stone's hard, but he's fair. He just, well, he don't take to newcomers easy. Especially not pretty boys," Catherine finished, her voice bitter. That night, lying in a bunk in the men's quarters. Thankfully, Pete had shown her to a small separate room that had been used for storage. Catherine stared at the rough wooden ceiling and wondered what she had gotten herself into. Through the thin walls, she could hear the other ranch hands talking and laughing. One voice rose above the others. "You see that English boy Stone brought in? Looked like he'd blow over in a strong wind." Laughter erupted. Catherine pulled her thin blanket tighter and closed her eyes. "Lord," she whispered, "I know deception is sin, but I had nowhere else to go. Please, please don't let them discover my secret. And please, somehow, make something good come from this tangle I've created." She didn't know if God was listening. She didn't know if he could forgive what she'd done. But she prayed anyway, because prayer was all she had left. 4 a.m. came with the subtlety of a gunshot. "Up!" Stone's voice cut through Catherine's sleep like a blade. She jolted awake to find him standing in her doorway, silhouetted against the pre-dawn darkness. "Stables." Now, Catherine stumbled from her bunk, still dressed in her clothes from the day before. She'd been too afraid to undress with the other men so close. Her body ached from the journey. Her hands were soft and uncalloused, and she had no idea what mucking stables actually entailed. She was about to find out. 20 stalls, Stone said, handing her a pitchfork. "Clean them all. Fresh hay in each. Water troughs filled. When you're done with that, there's a field that needs clearing, rocks, stumps, everything. Then you'll help with the afternoon feeding." Questions? Catherine looked at the pitchfork in her hands, then at the long row of stalls, each filled with, she swallowed hard manure and soiled hay. "No, sir. I mean no." Stone's mouth might have twitched. "Good. You'll find the water pump out back. Don't come find me when you're done. I'll know." The first hour was humiliating. Catherine had never done manual labor in her life. The pitchfork was heavier than it looked. The manure reeked worse than anything she could have imagined, and her refined sensibilities recoiled at every moment. She gagged. She paused to catch her breath. She felt tears prick her eyes. By the third stall, her hands were blistered. By the fifth, her back screamed in protest. By the eighth, she collapsed against the wall, gasping. That's when Stone appeared. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Recognition of someone at their limit. "You can quit," he said simply. "Take the next train back east. Bernard would understand." Catherine thought about it. For one blessed moment, she imagined walking away from this nightmare. But then what? Back to New York with no money? Back to England with no home? There was nowhere to go. This ranch, this deception, This impossible situation, it was all she had. "No," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. "I'll finish." Stone studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up a second pitchfork from the corner. "Left hip," he said. "What?" "Your stance. You're putting all the strain on your back. Pivot from your left hip. Use your whole body, not just your arms. Watch." He demonstrated, the pitchfork moving through the hay and manure with practiced efficiency. "Now you." Catherine tried to copy his movement. It felt awkward, unnatural, but easier. Marginally easier. "Better," Stone said. Then he left her to finish alone. That became the pattern of her days. Stone would assign her impossible tasks, clearing rocks from the field in the blazing sun, hauling water, mending fences, helping with the livestock. Each task pushed her to her breaking point. And each time, just when she thought she couldn't continue, Stone would appear. Not to coddle, not to sympathize, but to teach. Lift with your legs, not your back. Plant your feet wider for balance. Don't fight the horse. Let him know you're in charge, but don't bully him. Slowly, painfully, Catherine's body adapted. Her hands hardened with calluses. Her muscles, sore beyond measure at first, began to strengthen. Her pale English skin bronzed in the relentless sun. She learned to walk differently, talk differently, think differently. The other ranch hands began to accept Charlie, though they still teased him mercilessly about his accent and his initial clumsiness. Pete became a friend of sorts, teaching her how to play cards and swear properly, though Catherine drew the line at the worst profanity, much to Pete's amusement. "You're an odd one, Charlie," Pete said one evening as they sat on the porch of the bunkhouse. "You curse like you're reading from a book, and sometimes you sound more like a lady than a man. No offense." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. "I was raised strictly," she said quickly. "My father was very proper." Pete laughed. "Well, you're losing that polish fast enough. Give it another month. You'll be spitting tobacco with the best of us." "Heaven forbid," Catherine muttered, and Pete laughed again. But it was Stone who occupied most of her thoughts. The foreman was a mystery wrapped in granite. He rarely smiled, never joked, and treated everyone, including her, with the same gruff, demanding fairness. Yet Catherine began to notice things. The way he gentled his voice when speaking to the horses. The way he checked on an injured ranch hand twice a day, bringing him food from the main house. The way he worked longer hours than anyone else, always the first up and the last to bed. One Sunday, the ranch hands rode into Silver Creek for church. Catherine had been dreading this. Sitting in a house of God, while living a lie felt like blasphemy. But she had no choice. To refuse would raise suspicion. The Silver Creek Community Church was a simple wooden structure with a cross on the roof and wildflowers growing along the path. Inside, the benches were rough-hewn, the windows plain, but there was a peace in the space that made Catherine's throat tighten. Reverend Thomas, a kind-faced man in his 50s, preached from Luke 15, the parable of the prodigal son. This young man left his father's house, the Reverend said, his voice carrying through the small church. He squandered everything. He ended up feeding pigs, longing to eat their food. He thought he was unworthy to return home. But the father saw him from far off and ran to meet him. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. She was living in deception, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Was she like the prodigal son, so far from home that she couldn't find her way back to righteousness? The father didn't wait for the son to prove himself, Reverend Thomas continued. He didn't require the son to earn back his place in the family. The father loved him simply because he was his son. And God loves us the same way, not because we're perfect, but because we're his. After the service, Stone found her standing outside the church, staring at the mountains in the distance. "You thinking about heading back east, Charlie?" His voice was gentler than usual. "No," Catherine said. I was thinking about how far from home I am, and wondering if I'll ever find my way back." Stone was quiet for a moment. "I felt that way once. Ran away from my father's farm in Missouri when I was 16. Thought he was too strict, too religious, too everything. Spent years drifting, working different ranches, making every mistake a man can make." He paused. "By the time I was ready to go home, he'd passed. Never got to tell him I was sorry. Never got to ask if he'd forgive me." Catherine looked at him in surprise. "Stone never talked about his past. Do you think he would have? Forgiven you?" "I know he would have. That's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of God he served." Stone met her eyes, and for a moment, The granite cracked, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Whatever you're running from, Charlie, or whoever you're running to, God's already there. He's already waiting. You just have to stop running. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. Stop running. But how could she? She was trapped in this deception now. If she revealed the truth, she'd be cast out. She'd have nowhere to go. That night, alone in her room, she knelt by her bunk and prayed more honestly than she had in weeks. Lord, I'm lost. I'm living a lie. I don't know how to make this right without losing everything. Please show me the way. Give me the courage to face the truth. 3 weeks later, disaster struck. A cow was in difficult labor in the far pasture, and Stone needed help immediately. Catherine rode out with him, her heart pounding. She'd never assisted with birth before, animal or human. The calf stuck, Stone said grimly, his arm already inside the cow. I need you to hold her steady. Keep her calm. For the next hour, Catherine held the cow's head, stroking her neck, murmuring soothingly while Stone worked. It was messy, exhausting, and terrifying. The cow bellowed in pain. Stone's face was set in grim concentration. Catherine prayed silently, desperately, for both mother and calf. Finally, with a rush of fluid and blood, the calf emerged. For a terrible moment, it lay still. Then Stone cleared its nose and mouth, rubbed it vigorously, and the calf gasped, shuddered, and let out a weak cry. Thank God, Stone breathed. Thank God, Catherine echoed, tears streaming down her face. They sat in the grass, watching the mother cow lick her newborn calf, both of them exhausted and elated. You did good, Charlie, Stone said. Real good. Catherine looked at him. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. I couldn't have done it without you. You're becoming a good ranch hand, Stone said. I was wrong about you at first. You've got grit. You've got heart. Your uncle's going to be proud. The words should have made her happy. Instead, they filled her with dread. Bernard would be back from the high pasture in 3 days. And when he arrived, he would expect to see his nephew Charlie, a young man. Instead, he would discover the truth. And Catherine's entire world would come crashing down. The night before Bernard's return, Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. Should she run? Try to maintain the deception? Confess before Bernard arrived? At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went outside. The Montana sky was filled with more stars than she'd ever imagined existed, spread across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. She walked to the empty corral and leaned against the fence. Couldn't sleep either? Catherine jumped. Stone emerged from the shadows, carrying a saddle. Even at this ungodly hour, he was working. Just thinking, she said. About seeing your uncle? Stone set down the saddle and joined her at the fence. It's natural to be nervous. You've changed a lot in 5 weeks. Yes, Catherine said softly. I've changed. More than you know, she thought. She'd arrived soft, frightened, clinging to her old identity. Now her hands were calloused, her body strong, her spirit tempered by hard work and harder lessons. She'd learned what it meant to push past her limits, to depend on herself, to find strength she never knew she possessed. And she'd fallen in love with Jackson McCord. The realization had crept up on her slowly. It wasn't the dramatic, sweeping romance she'd read about in novels. It was built on quiet moments. Stone teaching her to rope, his rare half-smile when she got it right. Stone bringing her water when she was too proud to stop working. Stone's gruff, good work at the end of a long day. She'd learned to read the softness beneath his granite exterior, to see the man of faith and integrity who'd been hardened by loss but never broken. But he thought she was a man. He would never know how she felt. And tomorrow, when her secret was revealed, he would hate her for the deception. Stone, she said suddenly, if someone lied to you, but they had a good reason, would you forgive them? Stone was quiet for a long moment. Depends on the lie. And the reason? What if it was a big lie? About who they were? Stone turned to look at her. In the starlight, his face was all shadows and angles. I've had people lie to me about who they were, Charlie. Con men, thieves, drifters looking for an easy mark. It's the worst kind of betrayal because it makes you question everything. Every conversation, every moment. Was any of it real? Catherine's heart sank. So you could never forgive that kind of lie. I didn't say that. Stone's voice was thoughtful. I said it depends on the reason. If someone lied because they were evil, because they wanted to hurt people, that's unforgivable. But if someone lied because they were desperate, because they were scared, because they didn't see another way. He paused. We all do things we're not proud of when we're cornered. The question isn't whether you lied. It's whether you have the courage to face the truth when the time comes. Catherine felt tears burning her eyes. And what if facing the truth means losing everything? Then you lose everything, Stone said simply. But you keep your soul. And sometimes that's enough. He left her standing there in the darkness, wrestling with his words. You keep your soul. And sometimes that's enough. The next morning, Bernard Ashford arrived. Catherine had imagined this moment 100 times, but the reality was both better and worse than her fears. Bernard was a big, ruddy-faced man in his 60s with kind blue eyes and a booming laugh. He swung down from his horse and looked around the assembled ranch hands. Where's my nephew Charlie? He called out. Want to get a look at young Henry's boy? Catherine stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. I'm here, sir. Bernard's face lit up. By God, look at you. Scrawny little thing, but Stone will fix that. Come here, boy, let me get a proper look at you. He pulled Catherine into a bear hug that nearly crushed her ribs. Over his shoulder, she saw Stone watching, his expression unreadable. You've got your father's eyes, Bernard said, pulling back to study her face. Henry was my favorite cousin, God rest him. I'm glad you're here, Charlie. Real glad. The warmth in his voice, the genuine affection, it made Catherine's deception feel 10 times worse. She opened her mouth to confess, but Bernard was already turning away. Stone, how's the boy been doing? Better than expected, Stone said. He's a hard worker once he gets going. Still green, but he learns fast. That's my family. Bernard clapped Catherine on the back hard enough to make her stagger. Come on, boy. Let's get you settled in the main house. Can't have my nephew sleeping in the bunkhouse like common labor. Catherine's blood ran cold. The main house. Private quarters. How long could she maintain this deception in close proximity to Bernard? I'm fine in the bunkhouse, sir. I don't want special treatment. Nonsense. Your family. The house has 3 empty bedrooms upstairs. Pick whichever one you like. That night, Catherine stood in her new room, a proper bedroom with a real bed, a wash basin, a wardrobe, and a lock on the door. The luxury of it made her want to cry. But more than that, she felt the walls closing in. She couldn't do this anymore. She had to tell Bernard the truth. She found him in his study after dinner, reviewing accounts. Uncle Bernard, she said, her voice shaking. I need to tell you something. Something important. He looked up, his expression concerned. What is it, boy? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm not. She swallowed hard. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not your nephew. I'm your niece. My name isn't Charlie. It's Catherine. The words hung in the air like smoke. Bernard stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair. I know, he said quietly. Catherine felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. You know. I suspected from your first letter. Henry only had one child, and I knew it was a girl. Catherine, he called her. I thought maybe I'd remembered wrong, so I wired some old friends in England. They confirmed it. He smiled sadly. The question was, why were you pretending to be a boy? Catherine sank into a chair, her legs giving out. But you invited me anyway. You let me. I figured you had your reasons. And I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. Bernard's voice was kind. You want to tell me now? What happened? The whole story came pouring out. Her father's death, the debts, the broken engagement, her desperate situation. I thought if you knew I was a woman, you wouldn't let me come. I thought you'd turn me away. I was wrong to deceive you, and I'm so sorry. Bernard was quiet for a long moment. Child, your family. You think I'd turn away Henry's daughter? I'd have brought you here either way. But, he paused. I understand why you did it. And to be honest, it's worked out better than I expected. You've proven yourself. Stone says you're becoming a fine ranch hand. What happens now? Catherine asked. Should I stop pretending? That's your choice. But I'll tell you this. Once the men know you're a woman, everything changes. The easy camaraderie? Gone. They'll treat you different, whether they mean to or not. And finding work on a ranch as a woman. He shook his head. It's not impossible, but it's hard. So I should keep lying? I didn't say that. I said it's your choice. But Catherine, whatever you decide, you're staying here. This is your home now. You're my family, and I take care of my family. Catherine left the study with her mind spinning. Bernard's acceptance was more than she dared hope for. But it didn't solve her real problem. Because it wasn't the other ranch hand she was worried about. It was Stone. She thought about his words from the night before. The question isn't whether you lied. It's whether you have the courage to face the truth when the time comes. The time had come. She had to tell him. But before she could find Stone, disaster struck again. This time in a way no one could have predicted. The next morning, a rider came thundering into the ranch yard, his horse lathered and exhausted. "Fire," he shouted. "Wildfire in the South Canyon. It's heading this way." The Montana sky turned orange as the wildfire devoured the dry grasslands. Smoke rose in thick columns, turning day into twilight. Every available hand on Thunder Ridge Ranch sprang into action. "We've got maybe 3 hours before it reaches the south pasture," Stone said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Bernard, take half the men and start a fire break along the creek. Pete, you and the others get the cattle moved to the north pasture. Charlie," he turned to Catherine, "you're with me. We're going to try to save the Johnson family." The Johnsons were homesteaders with a small farm directly in the fire's path. As Catherine rode beside Stone, the heat grew intense. Her eyes watered from the smoke. Her horse danced nervously, sensing the danger. "Stay close to me," Stone ordered. "If I tell you to run, you run." "Understood, understood." They found the Johnson family frantically trying to gather their possessions. Mary Johnson, pregnant and terrified, clutched her 2 young children. Her husband Tom was trying to hitch their wagon to a panicked horse. "No time for that," Stone said. "Leave it all. Everyone on horseback now." "But our things," Mary started. "Your things aren't worth your lives. Move." They got the family mounted, Mary and the baby with Tom, the older child with Stone. Catherine looked back at the approaching fire. It moved like a living thing, devouring everything in its path. The roar of it was deafening. "Ride," Stone commanded. They raced ahead of the flames, pushing the horses to their limits. The heat was overwhelming. Embers fell like deadly rain. Catherine's horse stumbled on the rough ground, nearly throwing her. She regained her seat, her heart hammering. "There!" Stone pointed to the creek that formed Thunder Ridge's southern boundary. "The fire break. We make it there, we're safe." They were going to make it. Catherine could see Bernard and the other men at the creek, waving them on. Just 100 more yards. Tom's horse screamed and went down, its legs snapped by a hidden gopher hole. Tom and Mary and the baby tumbled to the ground. The fire was 50 yards behind them and closing fast. Stone wheeled his horse around without hesitation. "Get the Johnsons to the creek," he shouted to Catherine. "I'll get Tom and his family." But Catherine saw what Stone couldn't. A massive burning tree was falling directly in his path. In 2 seconds, it would crush him. She didn't think. She drove her horse between Stone and the falling tree, shoving his mount aside with her own. The burning tree crashed down, missing Stone by inches. But it trapped Catherine's horse, pinning its leg. The animal screamed in pain and terror. Catherine tried to dismount, but her foot caught in the stirrup. She was trapped, and the fire was seconds away. "Charlie." Stone's voice was raw with something Catherine had never heard before, fear. He was off his horse in an instant, running back toward her through the smoke and flames. "No!" Catherine screamed. "Get the Johnsons. Save them." Stone ignored her. He reached her, cut her free from the stirrup with his knife, and hauled her onto his shoulder in one smooth motion. The fire was everywhere now, a wall of orange death. Stone ran through it, his body shielding Catherine from the worst of the flames. Then they were through, stumbling into the creek. The cold water was shocking after the heat. Catherine gasped, coughing, her lungs full of smoke. Stone collapsed beside her, his shirt scorched, his face blackened. "The Johnsons," Catherine started. "Safe," Bernard called out. He and Pete had pulled the family to safety while Stone saved Catherine. "Everyone's safe." Catherine looked at Stone. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Anger? Relief? Something else? "You could have died," he said hoarsely. "You pushed me out of the way." "What?" "Because," Catherine said simply. "Because I—" She didn't get to finish. Stone pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. His body was shaking. "Don't you ever do that again," he said against her hair. "Don't you ever." And that's when he felt it. The softness where there should be none. The curves hidden beneath the loose shirt. The difference in her frame that he'd attributed to her slightness. Stone went absolutely still. Then he pushed her back, holding her at arm's length, his eyes searching her face. Really seeing her for the first time. The delicate features he'd thought feminine for a young man. The voice that never quite deepened enough. The way she moved, the way she sat, the 100 tiny details he'd dismissed because he'd never thought to question. You're not. His voice was strangled. You're a woman. Catherine couldn't speak. She just nodded. Stone's face went through a dozen expressions in as many seconds. Shock, confusion, comprehension, and finally, something that looked like betrayal. He dropped his hands from her shoulders and stepped back. All this time. 5 weeks. You've been lying to me. To everyone. Stone, please. Don't. His voice was like ice. Don't say anything. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the smoke-filled landscape. Catherine sank to her knees in the creek, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the creek water and the ash that fell like black snow. Around her, the ranch hands were starting to realize what Stone had discovered. She could hear their whispers, see their shocked faces. Bernard waded into the creek and helped her to her feet. Come on, child. Let's get you to the house. That night, as the fire burned itself out against the firebreak and the ranch hands celebrated their salvation, Catherine sat alone in her room. She'd gotten what she wanted, the truth was out. But the cost was higher than she'd imagined. Stone wouldn't speak to her, wouldn't even look at her. And the man she'd grown to love now looked at her like she was a stranger. Worse, like she was an enemy. She opened her Bible to Proverbs 28 verse 13. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. She'd confessed. She'd faced the truth. But where was the mercy? Where was the redemption? Lord, she prayed through her tears, I did what you asked. I told the truth. But it's broken everything. Stone hates me. The men look at me differently. I don't know where I belong anymore. Please, please show me the way forward. Because I can't see it. Outside her window, the Montana sky was clearing. The fire was out. The immediate danger had passed. But Catherine knew that the real trial was just beginning. The morning after the fire, Catherine came down to breakfast expecting hostility. What she got was worse, awkward silence. The ranch hands who had joked with Charlie now couldn't meet her eyes. Pete, who'd been her friend, mumbled a greeting and quickly left. Only Bernard seemed unchanged, setting a plate in front of her with the same gruff kindness he'd always shown. Don't mind them, he said. They'll adjust. Will they? Catherine pushed her food around her plate without eating. Will Stone? Bernard sighed. Stone's a complicated man, Catherine. He's been hurt before. Deceived before. It's going to take time. Maybe I should leave. Go back east, find work. And run away again? That's not who you are anymore, Catherine. You've proven yourself. You saved the foreman's life yesterday. You worked harder than most of these men your first week. You've earned your place here. But Stone will come around. Or he won't. But you can't build your life around what Stone McCord thinks. You have to decide who you want to be. Catherine spent the next week trying to find her place in this new reality. She moved out of the bunkhouse entirely, taking over one of the spare rooms in the main house. She stopped binding her chest and wearing exclusively men's clothing, though she still dressed practically, split skirts and sturdy blouses better suited to ranch work than the elaborate gowns she'd worn in England. But working on the ranch became impossible. Not because Bernard forbade it. He actively encouraged her to continue. But because Stone gave her nothing to do. He assigned her no tasks. He spoke to her only when absolutely necessary, his words clipped and cold. When she tried to help with the horses, he told her to stay in the house. When she offered to assist with fence repairs, he sent Pete instead. He's being unreasonable, Bernard said after a particularly frustrating day. I'll talk to him. No, Catherine said. He has every right to be angry. I lied to him. I deceived everyone. He's justified. That Sunday, Catherine went to church in Silver Creek wearing a proper dress for the first time. The transformation was complete. Lady Catherine Ashford had fully emerged from the disguise of Charlie. The townspeople, who'd heard about the fire and her deception, stared openly. Some whispered. A few of the women smiled sympathetically. Reverend Thomas's sermon that morning was from Genesis, the story of Jacob. Catherine's breath caught as she realized God was speaking directly to her. Jacob deceived his father Isaac to steal his brother's blessing, the Reverend said. He thought he was being clever, securing his future through trickery. But that one deception cost him decades of separation from his family. He had to work for Laban, who deceived him in return. He had to flee from his brother's anger. The thing he gained through deception became a burden he carried for years. Catherine felt tears sliding down her cheeks. This was her story. She'd deceived to survive, but the cost was proving higher than she'd imagined. But here's what's remarkable about Jacob's story, Reverend Thomas continued. God didn't abandon him. Even in his deception, even in his running, God was with him. And eventually, God brought him to a place of reckoning. At the river Jabbok, Jacob wrestled with God himself. He wouldn't let go until God blessed him. And God changed his name from Jacob, which means deceiver, to Israel, which means one who struggles with God. The Reverend's voice grew gentle. God redeems our mistakes. He doesn't excuse them, but he uses them. He transforms us from deceivers into people who struggle honestly with him. And through that struggle, we become who we were always meant to be. After the service, Stone was waiting by the wagons. Catherine's heart leaped until she saw his expression. It wasn't softened. If anything, it was harder than before. I need to talk to you, he said. Alone. They walked away from the church, toward a grove of cottonwood trees by the creek. Catherine's hands were shaking. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. I've been thinking, Stone said, his back to her, about what you did, why you did it. And I understand. I do. You were desperate. You had nowhere to go. You did what you had to do to survive. Catherine felt a tiny spark of hope. Stone. But understanding doesn't mean I can forgive it. He turned to face her then, and the pain in his eyes took her breath away. I told you about my past. About how I ran from my father. About the regrets I carry. I opened up to you because I thought, his voice cracked. I thought you were someone I could trust. You can trust me, Catherine said desperately. Everything else was real. The work, the friendship, the person I became here. That was all real. Was it? Because I don't even know who you are. Lady Catherine Ashford. English nobility. You're not some kid from London trying to make good. You're someone completely different than who I thought you were. No, Catherine said, stepping closer. I'm exactly who you thought I was. The name didn't matter. The title didn't matter. I'm the person who mucked stalls beside you. Who helped deliver that calf. Who pushed you out of the way of that burning tree. That person was real, Stone. That person is me. Stone shook his head. I can't do this. Every time I look at you, I remember that night by the corral when you asked me about forgiveness. You were asking for yourself. You were preparing me for this. And I answered you honestly, never knowing that you were the liar I was talking about. You said the question wasn't whether someone lied, Catherine reminded him, tears streaming down her face. You said it was whether they had the courage to face the truth. I'm facing it now, Stone. I'm standing here, telling you everything. I was Lady Catherine Ashford, yes. But that person died in London. The person standing in front of you now was forged on this ranch, by this land, by you. I'm asking you to see past the deception to who I really am. And who is that? Stone asked bitterly. Because I don't know anymore. Catherine took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of complete honesty, complete vulnerability. I'm someone who fell in love with a granite-hearted foreman who taught her what strength really means. I'm someone who found God again in the Montana wilderness after thinking he'd abandoned her. I'm someone who learned that home isn't a place or a title. It's where you're loved and where you work and where you belong. And I belong here, Stone. On this ranch. With you. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Stone stared at her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then he turned away. I need time, he said hoarsely. I need to think. I can't give you an answer right now. He walked away, leaving Catherine standing alone by the creek. She sank to her knees in the grass, her dress pooling around her, and wept. She'd laid her heart bare, and he'd walked away. She'd told him the truth, and it hadn't been enough. God, she prayed through her tears, I've done what you asked. I've been honest. I've faced the consequences. But it hurts so much. It hurts more than anything I've ever felt. Please give me strength to bear this. And if it's your will, please soften Stone's heart. Not for my sake, but because I know he's in pain too. Heal us both, Lord. Make us whole. The days that followed were the hardest of Catherine's life. Stone avoided her completely. He ate his meals in the bunkhouse instead of the main house. He gave his reports to Bernard in writing rather than face-to-face. When they passed each other in the ranch yard, he didn't acknowledge her existence. Catherine threw herself into other work. She helped the ranch cook, Mrs. Chun, with meals. She worked in the garden. She began teaching Sunday school in Silver Creek, finding joy in the children's simple faith. She wrote letters to distant relatives in England, reconnecting with family she'd thought lost forever. Slowly, painfully, she built a life that didn't revolve around Stone's approval. She found purpose in service, in faith, in being exactly who God had made her to be. Not the lady she'd been born as, not the boy she'd pretended to be, but the woman she was becoming. One afternoon, 3 weeks after their confrontation, Catherine was in the garden when she heard shouting from the corral. She ran toward the sound and found Pete on the ground, his leg twisted at an impossible angle. His horse stood nearby, eyes rolling in panic. He got spooked, another ranch hand said. Threw Pete right off. Legs broken for sure. Someone needs to ride to town for the doctor, Stone said, appearing from the barn. We can't move him until. I'll go, Catherine said immediately. Stone looked at her for the first time in weeks. It's a 2-hour ride. Hard riding. I can do it. Catherine was already moving toward the stable. I'm the best rider here besides you, and you need to stay with Pete. She didn't wait for his response. She saddled Storm, Bernard's fastest horse, and rode out at a gallop. The journey to Silver Creek usually took 2 leisurely hours. Catherine made it in 90 minutes, pushing Storm hard but not recklessly, arriving at Dr. Harrison's office with the horse lathered but sound. Dr. Harrison grabbed his bag and followed her back in his wagon. By sunset, Pete was splinted and dosed with laudanum, resting comfortably in the bunkhouse. You did good, Miss Catherine, Dr. Harrison said as he prepared to leave. Another hour, and we might have lost the leg. You saved it with your quick thinking. After the doctor left, Catherine found Stone standing outside the barn, staring at the sunset. She started to walk past him. She'd learned not to force conversation, but his voice stopped her. Thank you. For Pete. You could have let someone else go. Catherine turned to look at him. He's my friend. Why would I let someone else go? Because you've been. Stone struggled for words. Because I've been treating you like you don't belong here. Like you're not part of this ranch. Like you're not. He paused. Like you're not the person you proved yourself to be today. I am who I am, Stone, Catherine said quietly. Whether you acknowledge it or not. I'm not Charlie anymore, but I'm not the helpless lady who arrived here either. I'm something new. Something better, I hope. And I'll keep being that person whether you accept me or not. Because that's who God made me to be. She started to walk away again. But this time, Stone's hand caught her arm, gentle but insistent. Wait, he said. Please. I need to tell you something. Stone led Catherine to the same grove of cottonwoods where they'd had their painful confrontation 3 weeks earlier. The sun was setting, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. She'd learned not to hope, but she couldn't help the tiny spark that flickered to life at his gentler tone. I've been praying, Stone said, his back to her. Every day since I found out the truth. Asking God to help me understand. To help me see past my anger and hurt. And Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. And he's been showing me something. Something I didn't want to see. Stone turned to face her. I was angry at you for lying. But I was really angry at myself. Catherine frowned. I don't understand. I prided myself on being able to read people. On not being fooled. When you arrived, I saw a soft English boy who'd never done a day's work. I was determined to prove you couldn't hack it, to send you running back east. But you didn't run. You worked harder than anyone. You earned everyone's respect, including mine. He paused. And somewhere along the way, I started to care about you. More than I should have, given that I thought you were a young man who'd someday leave and build a life somewhere else. Catherine's breath caught. You cared about me? Like a brother, I told myself. Or a protege. Someone to mentor. Stone laughed bitterly. But that wasn't it. I felt protective of you. Proud of you. I thought about you when I should have been thinking about ranch business. When you asked me about forgiveness that night, I told you about my father, my regrets, things I've never told anyone. He met her eyes. I let you in, Catherine. And when I found out you weren't who I thought you were, it felt like God was punishing me for caring. For opening up again after I swore I'd never let anyone close. That's not fair, Catherine said, tears welling up. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to survive. I didn't know I'd fall. She stopped herself. Didn't know you'd fall in love with me? Stone finished quietly. You said it before. By the creek. I heard you. I've been thinking about those words every day since. Catherine couldn't speak. She just nodded. Stone stepped closer. I've been trying to convince myself that what I felt for Charlie was just respect. Friendship. Nothing more. But God kept showing me the truth. I'd watch you walk across the yard, and my heart would ache. I'd hear you laughing with Bernard, and I'd want to be the one making you laugh. I'd see you at church, and I'd think, she's beautiful. She's brave. She's everything I never knew I wanted. He reached out and took her hands in his. They were rough and calloused now, nothing like the soft hands of the lady she'd been. I fell in love with Charlie, Stone said. The hard-working, determined, slightly ridiculous English kid who refused to quit no matter how hard I pushed. And then I fell in love with Catherine, the woman who had the courage to deceive everyone to survive, and then the even greater courage to tell the truth no matter the cost. Catherine was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I lied to you. I know you are. And I forgive you. Stone pulled her close, and Catherine buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage and Montana wind. I forgive you because God's been reminding me that I'm no better. I deceived myself about my feelings. I judged you without knowing your story. I was proud and hard and unforgiving. And if God can forgive me for all that, how can I not forgive you? They stood there as the sun set, holding each other as the world turned golden around them. Finally, Stone pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. I love you, Catherine Ashford. Not Lady Catherine. Not Charlie. Just you. The real you, whoever that is. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life learning who that person is. Catherine laughed through her tears. The rest of your life? Jackson McCord, are you proposing to me? The next few months were the happiest of Catherine's life. Stone courted her properly, just as he'd promised. He took her to church socials, where they danced under Chinese lanterns and made the old ladies smile knowingly. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, bouquets of lupin and Indian paintbrush that she pressed between the pages of her Bible. He taught her to ride better, to rope cattle, to read the weather in the sky and the seasons in the land. One Saturday afternoon, Stone surprised her with a picnic by the creek. He'd packed sandwiches wrapped in cloth, fresh apples from town, and a jar of lemonade that Mrs. Chun had made. They sat on a blanket under the cottonwoods, listening to the water gurgle over the stones. Tell me about England, Stone said, lying back with his hands behind his head. What was your life like before? Catherine thought about the grand estate, the servants, the elaborate dinners and social obligations. It feels like a dream now, she said, like it happened to someone else. I wore beautiful gowns and went to balls. I had maids to dress me and do my hair. Everything was proper and planned and suffocating. Do you miss it? Sometimes I miss having clean hands, Catherine admitted with a laugh, and hot baths whenever I wanted them. But miss the life? No. I was playing a role there too, just a different one. Lady Catherine was as much a disguise as Charlie was. Here, I'm finally just me. Stone reached out and took her hand, running his thumb over her calluses. These hands built something real. They save lives. They work hard. They're beautiful. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. In England, soft hands had been a mark of status. Here, her rough hands were a badge of honor. Another time, Stone took her to visit the Johnson family. Their farm had been rebuilt with help from the Thunder Ridge Ranch hands, and the family was thriving. Mary Johnson welcomed them with fresh-baked bread and coffee. We owe you our lives, Tom Johnson said, shaking Stone's hand firmly. Both of you. The baby wouldn't be here if you hadn't gotten us out. The baby, a chubby, happy little girl they'd named Hope, reached for Catherine with pudgy hands. Catherine held her, breathing in that sweet baby smell, and felt something shift in her heart. She wanted this. Children of her own. A family built with stone. Stone watched her with the baby, and when they left, he was unusually quiet. What are you thinking? Catherine asked as they rode home. I was thinking, Stone said slowly, about how good you looked holding that baby, and how much I want to see you holding our baby someday. Catherine's breath caught. Someday soon, I hope. Real soon, Stone agreed, his eyes warm with promise. And Catherine taught him to laugh, to let go of his regrets, to believe that he was worthy of love and happiness. She read to him in the evenings from her favorite books. She sang hymns while she cooked with Mrs. Chun. She brought joy back to Thunder Ridge Ranch in a way that made even Bernard shake his head in wonder. "You've brought him back to life," Bernard told her one evening. Stone was good at his job, but he was dead inside, walking around like a ghost. "You changed that." "He changed me too," Catherine said. "He taught me what it means to be strong, to face hard truths, to work for what you want instead of expecting it to be handed to you." The proposal came on a crisp autumn evening. Stone took Catherine to the highest point on the ranch, where you could see for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the world in copper and gold. "This is my favorite place on earth," Stone said. "I used to come here when things got hard, when I felt alone. I'd sit and watch the sunset and talk to God, asking him why my life turned out the way it did, why I'd made so many mistakes, why I was so alone." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "And now I know why. I was alone because I was waiting for you. All those years, all those mistakes, all that running, it was bringing me here, to this moment, to you." He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "Catherine Ashford, you came here pretending to be someone you weren't, and in the process, you became exactly who you were meant to be. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, the bravest, the most faithful, and I don't want to spend another day without you." His voice roughened with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you help me run this ranch, raise a family, and build a life that honors God?" Catherine pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you, you wonderful, gruff, granite-hearted man. I'll marry you and love you and annoy you with my English accent for the rest of our lives." Stone slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the sun set over the Montana prairie. And in that moment, everything that had been broken was made whole. Every deception was redeemed. Every mistake was transformed into grace. They were married in Silver Creek Community Church on a snowy December morning. Bernard walked Catherine down the aisle, proud as any father. Pete, his leg healed, stood as Stone's best man. The church was packed with ranch hands, townspeople, and the Johnson family, who brought their baby, now 6 months old and healthy. Catherine wore a simple ivory dress that Mrs. Chun and the women of Silver Creek had sewn for her. It wasn't the elaborate gown she would have worn in London, but it was more beautiful because it had been made with love by her new community. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers, the same lupin and Indian paintbrush that Stone had brought her during their courtship. As she walked down the aisle on Bernard's arm, she saw Stone waiting at the altar. He wore his Sunday best, a black suit he'd clearly borrowed, his hair slicked back, his boots polished to a shine. But it was the look in his eyes that made her catch her breath. Pure love, pure joy, pure gratitude. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" Reverend Thomas asked. "I do," Bernard said, his voice thick with emotion. He kissed Catherine's cheek and placed her hand in Stone's. "Take care of her, son." "With my life," Stone promised. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, his eyes twinkling as he spoke. "Marriage is a covenant," he said. "It's two people choosing to love each other, not because they're perfect, but because they're willing to be honest, to be vulnerable, to see each other as God sees us, flawed but precious, broken but redeemable." He looked at Catherine and Stone. "You two have already learned this lesson. You've already walked through fire, literally and figuratively. You've faced deception, betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption. And now you stand here, ready to face the future together. Not as a lord and lady, not as a foreman and a ranch hand, but as two children of God who found each other in the wilderness and chose to build a home." When Stone kissed his bride, the church erupted in cheers and applause. And Catherine thought about how far she'd come, from a desperate, penniless woman in a New York boarding house to a beloved wife in the heart of Montana. From Lady Catherine Ashford to Charlie to Catherine McCord. But she wasn't any of those names, really. She was simply herself, the woman God had been shaping all along through trials and deceptions, through hard work and harder lessons, through loss and love and redemption. 5 years later, Catherine stood on the porch of Thunder Ridge Ranch, watching the sun rise over the Montana mountains. Her hand rested on her swollen belly. Their third child was due any day now. Inside the house, she could hear Stone getting their 2 young sons ready for the day, his deep voice patient as he helped 3-year-old Henry tie his boots and redirected 2-year-old Bernard away from the stove. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Catherine had modernized the bookkeeping and expanded their breeding program. Stone had trained new hands and improved their winter feeding strategies. Together, they built Thunder Ridge into one of the most successful ranches in Montana Territory. But more than that, they'd built a family. A real family, rooted in faith and honesty and love. Uncle Bernard, now retired but still living with them, doted on his great-nephews. Pete had married a girl from town and built a cabin on ranch land. Mrs. Chun had taught Catherine to cook proper American meals, and Catherine had taught her to make English tea. The door opened behind her, and Stone's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands joining hers on her belly. "Good morning, Mrs. McCord," he murmured against her hair. "Good morning, Mr. McCord." Catherine leaned back against him. "Did you get the boys dressed?" "Mostly. Henry's wearing his shirt backward, and Bernard has somehow gotten jam in his hair, but they're dressed." He chuckled. "I still can't believe you talked me into naming him after your uncle. Bernard saved my life by taking me in. It's only right." Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Taking on a wife who came with so much baggage and deception?" Stone cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Not for a second. You taught me what it means to be brave. To be honest, even when it costs you everything. To trust God's plan even when it makes no sense." He kissed her gently. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine. You and these boys and the baby on the way and this life we've built. All of it. Mama, Papa, come quick." Henry's voice called from inside. "Baby is crying." They looked at each other and laughed. "Duty calls," Catherine said. As they walked back into their home, their loud, messy, beautiful home, Catherine sent up a silent prayer of thanks. "Thank you, Lord, for bringing me here. For taking my desperation and turning it into purpose. For taking my deception and transforming it into redemption. For giving me a home, a family, and a love that I never knew existed." She thought about Lady Catherine Ashford, that frightened girl who'd cut her hair and boarded a train west. She thought about Charlie, the boy who'd learned to muck stalls and rope cattle. And she thought about Catherine McCord, the woman she'd become, strong, faithful, loved, and loving. They were all her. Every version, every name, every identity. God had used them all to shape her into the person He'd always intended her to be. And she wouldn't change a single moment of the journey. Dear friends, thank you for journeying with me through Catherine and Stone's story. I hope it reminded you that God is in the business of redemption. He takes our mistakes, our deceptions, our desperate choices, and He weaves them into something beautiful. Catherine learned that hiding her true self might solve an immediate problem, but only in embracing who she really was. In all her flawed, broken glory, could she find real love and real belonging. And Stone learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to see someone as God sees them. Precious, redeemable, worthy of love. Perhaps you're carrying a secret. Perhaps you're living a deception out of desperation. Perhaps you're running from something in your past. This story is God's reminder to you. He already knows. He already sees. And He's already working all things together for your good, if you'll trust Him. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear about God's redemptive love, and subscribe to the Blessed Christian Storyteller for more faith-filled stories. And if you'd like me to tell a particular story next, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, God's grace is sufficient. His love never fails. And your story, no matter how tangled it seems right now, is in His hands. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He turn His face toward you and give you peace. Amen.